Hey folks, Kevin here. Well, it's August 23rd, 2020, a nice hot day today. And today I wanted to share some of the construction components of the access road along the Beaver Dam. And the video that's coming up is going to be broken up into several segments. It'll start off with me having the helmet cam on and starting to talk about how I had through this whole drought had all this dry material that came from the breakdown products of the brush and trees that we had piled up and covered with dirt for several years. And previously I talked about taking that and using that as the soil fill on top of all the root balls and trunks and branches of the trees and all the rocks, which made it much easier for the equipment to roll over and all. And we're just past the deepest part of this lower dam wall. And in today's video, I start off with the helmet cam on, like I talked about, how several days ago, it was just over a week ago actually, that we had that one rain event. But before that rain event, what I did do was I took water and I took muck and sand, soil from each side of the access road and covered it up, because I just couldn't stand the amount of powdery stuff that was constantly in the air was getting into my respiratory system and my eyes, and I was just caked at the end of the day each day. Fortunately, we got that rain event, and that's just over a week ago, and I've been doing other jobs here on the property. So the video is broken up into video clips over time. There's the first section of it is really broken up into a couple of parts. One from today with me with the helmet cam on, and then I interrupt it and say a few days ago, and then I was using my phone to shoot a little bit of it, and I do that twice during the process to show some of the root balls from some of the poplar trees, and there's some cherry trees there. So I just wanted to show how I actually put those together, and then we get back to some after going back and forth between my phone and the helmet cam from today, but the phone from a few days ago. Then we go to some time-lapse video that I'm going to try and put together, so it hopefully makes sense of me placing the root balls, placing the tree trunks, coming down with some of the rock pile, an old concrete pile that I had piled up for many years, and loading that into the bucket and then bringing it down and trying to fill the voids, because when I use soft materials like the woody material and branches and logs and root balls, there's spaces in between, and placing the muck there initially, well, that sort of works its way down in there, but it doesn't really get solidified so that you can safely drive over it. So then I take rocks and cover up the whole area, and then poke those down in, shake everything up, trying to get everything to settle down, the big bony parts down below, filling in all the voids. And then and I show a little bit of the area where I harvested before the rain, knocked down some of the big poplar trees. That's actually in the beginning part, sorry about that. And those are the tree trunks and the root balls that I use for doing the work. And then yesterday and today, going down and taking a lot of that material and fitting it in piece by piece. It won't end up showing the most recent how it is, because I didn't go back down and shoot where we're at this point, but we got over a 3 or 4 day period another 10-12 foot in extension of the access road. But I wanted to put this together in case anybody wants to mimic something like this. This is very similar to how I construct a hugelkultur pit. When I first started installing hugelkultur pits, I dig a great big trench, cut off all the limbs, lay the trunk with the root ball attached, shove that down in there, and then put branches in along the in-between so it'd fill in all the voids and all. So it was pretty densely packed, but it wasn't as densely packed as I'm able to do it now, because I detached the root balls from the trunks, and when a trunk narrows down, I switch the next trunk to the opposite direction, so it takes more time flipping trunks around so that there's really almost no void between trunks and branches and all. And then with this system, I really try to take a lot of the brush with small root balls attached to them and run them in, you know, all four different directions. So root ball at this side, leaves up at that side, root ball at this side, leaves at this side, root ball at that side, leaves at this side. So everything's meshed together so that as the tops break down more quickly than the root balls do, they're all tied together, and driving over it over the next couple of years, as it breaks down, it'll break down more evenly instead of everything, the root balls being on one side of the access road and the branches being on the other side. The side with the branches and the leaves are going to break down much more quickly, and the road would get like this and it'd make it unsafe for the excavator to work down. So I'm going to try and narrate over some of the time-lapse video, and hopefully this will all make sense. If there's comments or questions, please leave them below. If you find this of value, please give us a thumbs up. Consider subscribing if you haven't subscribed. That helps us out, but the thumbs up and comments always help out as well. It makes it so that these videos will get a little bit more exposure on the YouTube algorithm, so that other people can enjoy some of the things that we're doing here. So you folks take care and have a fantastic day, and by all means, folks, stay safe, grow food, and take good care of yourselves. Bye-bye now. Okay, this is August 23rd when I'm making this recording. Several days ago, before we got the rain that I talked about in one of the last videos, one of the things I did do, well, the night before I came in here and worked, I actually, everything was so dusty and so powdery on the driving up and down here and working my way out here. It just got to the point where my eyes were just getting so crusty from all the dust that was continuously coming up. I went ahead and used Bumblebee to go ahead and grab as much sand and muck from the side along here on each side, and I took buckets and buckets and buckets, loads of water just to wet down the dusty stuff. I dumped the water on, a big plume of dust would go up. So because even though we had forecasts for more thunder showers, I wasn't at all confident, since we've been in this prolonged drought, that we'd get any rain. So I really wetted everything down. Ground is still a bit wet out here after putting all the muck and sand on top of this before we got that rain. And then I also, because the soil had been so powdery and dry for so long, I took water from the pond system and saturated the surface there. The next day, since it was still a very dry day, those thunderstorms all missed us, I came in here. Now this was all brush and trees right up in here, but not too many trees. We had a few large poplars, like that one right there that's in front of us. We still have some more dead ones in here. They have poison ivy on them. And we had a couple of ash in here as well. There's a dead cherry there. I didn't touch that one yet. And we had lots and lots of these small trees or small bushes that the beaver had taken off the tops of. So working my way in here, I grabbed all of the small ones that the beaver had already taken off their tops. I made a big pile here, here's some. Same thing over there, so I could get around. I toppled over the large trees that were dead. I like to get them before they decompose too much, because they can fall back down on the piece of equipment on you. And I piled up the logs over here, the big root balls over there. So here are a few of the tree stumps that I pulled out the other day before we got the rain. Some of them are upside down, some are right side up, and some of the tree trunks here. And I was able to clear out some of this area. Now it's pretty darn wet over there. I can't really get in there. But over there is where the pond edge will be. We're getting close to the edge. But beautiful soil in here. Sand down below, that's where the sand is, where I had to dig out all the stumps from around here. There's a smaller stump here. Another smaller one there. Thank goodness for Bumblebee. And worked my way down in here, and as soon as I got done that day, moving all the trees out and piling up all the brush over here, it rained. We got that rain event that we had. So it was a pretty good amount of rain. It really helped out the food force an awful lot. But I had at least accomplished getting in here before it got too wet. Now this area was quite easy to work with, and you could see the places where there's sand on the surface here. The soil was about 1 foot deep in some places to 2 feet deep. It gets deeper over in there where it's lower. And so it's still wet from a few days ago, several days ago that it rained. But I was fortunate enough to get all the logs up here and the root balls over here. And the day before yesterday, so it had been several days now, this started getting dry enough so I could actually go on out here on the excavator and start putting the root balls and out into this area here. And I did shoot some GoPro footage, so that'll be coming up. So there's some GoPro footage of me taking the root balls and trying to place them carefully, some with the roots down with the trunk sticking up, and some with the roots up and the trunk sticking down, all along in this area here. And so here's an example of where we're on top of a large root ball here, and these are some of the roots, and they'll all break right off, no problem. And so those root balls are all in this area and in that area there. All the trunks I brought over into this area. Yesterday I brought in some of the tops here. Yesterday I brought these. I brought up some of the muck from right over in here. And then I went back to the stone pile and concrete, so that's a piece of concrete there, because previously I had taken, as I mentioned the first part of this video, I had taken a lot of the muck and the sand from the sides and piled it up in here, and of course that squishes down between all of the root balls that are in this area. So this whole thing, you could see some depressions in here. So as I drive over it back and forth, you could see the tracks where I drive. Well, some of that soil works its way down into these areas and makes these lower in elevation track areas as it becomes more compressed and consolidated. And this whole thing will gradually, over the next couple of years, drop at least a foot. But the stones, getting the stones really helps where the muck was that was feeding in between all of the roots and all the branches and all the trunks. That really helps out an awful lot. All this woody material is going to break down and really going to sink down to quite a bit. You can see there's an old cement block there from years ago. And I took the muck here. More rocks are going to have to go on here. Today I'll grab some of the brush and bushes and start filling in all of these voids in here, and then I'll have to get more rocks and put them on top of here, and then I can work my way out a little bit further. So you can see down in here there's holes where the muck actually makes its way down. I jiggle it a little bit, trying to get as much of the stuff to start settling down, and I try to pack this, trying to keep it as wide as possible over here, so that I actually have I'm not sure, it looks like this area curves in and then works our way out right around to go to the upper dam. And I don't know how much soil is over here. It looks like it gets more shallow with that sort of marginal plants there. It looks like the elevation really starts to go up a little bit. So the topography is changing in this area. The deepest spot is right here. right in this location. So from here, we're down, probably 9 feet, right over into about here. And of course, this is where, I'm sorry, right over until about here. And this is where the channel goes, where the beaver make their way back and forth all the time. Now they have changed their crossing path. They do come across here a little bit, but because, I'm not sure the absolute reason. Where's the spot they're going through? Here's the spot they're coming through now. So they come up here, they work their way up here. Not sure if this is showing up. They work their way up here, go across right here, and then right back down there. And that way they can make it to their other pathway there, and that goes all the way out to their den. And I do see them, but it's really quickly each time as I see it. It's just a brief moment or two when I'm working here. So that's a nice easy path. You could see a little bit of the oil slick on the surface of here, and I try not to grease up the bucket. So the parts that go in the water, the grease actually, this is a really good grease that really doesn't break down very easily with with water. It's very hydrophobic, this is, so it really doesn't go, but little pieces of the grease will break off at times. So when I'm working in the water or grabbing the muck, I try to make sure that I'm not greasing those lower parts that can get in the water at that time. Then I grease it up when I'm gonna work in these areas. Keeping these pieces of equipment really well lubricated is essential, so that it can decrease the wear and tear. And I do use this bugger quite a bit. So there'll probably be some GoPro footage, time-lapse, and I may narrate over it possibly, of me taking the root balls, bringing them out here, taking the trunks, placing them, possibly going and getting the rocks as well. I think I have a little bit of footage, and then distributing the rocks and the pieces of concrete and all, getting those to pack in there, and having a place where I can actually turn around, because the tractor gets kind of scary. Even though this looks pretty darn wide, with a not a four-wheel drive tractor, and this older tractor has more play in those front wheels, sometimes it gets a bit hairy. I'm very careful and try not to get too tired or too dizzy when I'm working with this. So now I'm going to get to work. So there's 2 deer right in front of us, and they're just watching us and paying attention. There may be more, but I don't see the rest. So we'll go ahead and gently move up. They'll take off and stop and then look back at us in a minute. There go the deer. They're always watching us out here. So first thing I'm going to start off with is showing the positioning of the tree stumps or the root balls. You can see I cut these off a little bit shorter, the trunks, because the system's getting shallower, and I want to get these so that not too much sticks up too high, where when everything consolidates and compacts down, I don't have some stumps sticking up out of here. And so the first one I put with the actual trunk of the stump sticking up. These ones I'll start poking, invert, put the roots upward, and I fit these all around in a clockwise fashion, right around the central one that I put the trunk facing up on the root ball. So it's just the process of trying to fit these around, press them down, get it into the soil as deep as possible, then grab some of the very wet sediment that's going to be filtered in between. When I can get down deep enough, there'll be sand there as well that I get into. So it's really good when I can mix the sand with the with the soil, the mud as well. Or sometimes there's rocks that come up, and in this area there aren't too many rocks, but as I go a couple more feet, there are quite a few rocks, and I'm getting more to some bedrock, or it's a very large, one of the old farmer stone piles down below there. So on the right side of the stumps that you see me moving over in there, there's a lot of tree trunks that I haven't shown so far. So that's where we take the thick end and the narrow end and get those all interlaced together on the right side, because that's the downhill side on the right side. And again, fit these around clockwise all the way around that initial stump the trunk that I put in where the root ball that I put in with the trunk that had been cut off was sticking up. So I just keep fitting them around in here. All this muddy material and silty material, I try to fill in. I shake it as much as I can so that as much of the material will work down in between. But the sand and silt also start to interlock the fibrous roots and get them all interacting with one another, and it makes it more solidified as time goes on. This is one of those ones that has really narrow roots, so this will go out there as well. We'll flip it over, and then I'll tuck it in up underneath the other root ball. So we get 4 or 5 or 6 of them inverted around the one that has the trunk sticking up. So now I'm grabbing some of the tree trunks. These will go on the right side. I often try to get them so that I cut off more of these little protuberances, unless they're going to be right at the base, and I want those little side branches to stick into the mud of the soil or the surface of the area that I'm pressing them into. So they'll be around the base. The ones with the straighter ones will end up being interlocked along the tops of them as I progress here. Now I'm going to go ahead, and in this area here, I start using the excavator, the small bucket here, with the tooth bucket to grab, and you see it, I drop some material, but there's the root balls from all of the beaver cut off branches, and well, not branches, but small trunks to bushes to small trees. Now they eat a lot of that the bark off of these small ones. You can see there's, well, it went by pretty quickly, but there's a tree trunk that's probably about 4 to 5 inches in diameter that was cut off by the beaver. So yes, all the branches up above were consumed, the leaves were consumed, and then the inner interior to the bark was used in some of their construction projects. So all of these small materials, previously I had gone ahead and moved those all close to the road so that I'd have easy access to them getting these materials. Now the sod and all is going to have dirt and roots holding it together, so I press those down into the wet sand and silt, mucky material that I pulled out. Now I've got a bunch of tree trunks that are small that have the roots still attached. Some of these will go to the outside, and they work their way all along the outer surface of the system, so that the roots of one tree is always connecting to the roots of the next tree, and that helps to interlock the trunks that are there. So I'll grab a few of these, keep interlocking these roots as I go down, so that the entire right side is although it looks like it's trunks, but as I advance my way further, it's the roots of all these smaller trees interlocking all of those as we go along. And then I'll grab some of the sediment and material from the other side. I'll try to get these all snugged in here. There will be the oddball curly ones that I'll try and make fit, but I try to leave no voids, if at all possible, as I'm doing this. So Grabbing some more tree trunks here. Oh, there's one of the big curly ones. I'll probably, no, I'm going to grab these two poplars right here. And these, the one that's closest to it is the base of the trunk on the left side, and the other one, the base of the trunk, is on the right side. So always trying to have the tapers opposite of each other, so that I'm able to ultimately keep it so that there's not a taper, and so when I'm driving over it in the future, it doesn't pose a risk of me of one end of it sliding down deeper into the muck. So here we are. Now I'm going to go ahead and grab more of the brushy material. This is all of the stuff that the beavers have chopped all the material off. And as I drive over them, I identify them as well. So here's one of the longer trunks. I should show this as well, but the longest trunks that are maybe 25, 35 feet long that I can handle, they really are difficult to go with. They'll go along the very outside on the right side of this system. This trunk I'm going to play with for a couple of minutes because it isn't quite straight. So I can't drive out too far on this because I'll tip over. So what I've got to do is manipulate it as best as I can. And I'm going to try and get it on the other side of the tree up ahead of us. There we go. I got it on the other side of the tree. And we'll extend this right out as far as I can past that tree and get it positioned as best as I can so that it doesn't create a lot of voids in this whole system. Okay. Let's go back and get some more material. So it's a repeating process of integrating all components of the trees and the materials that the beaver have left for me ultimately. So the ones with the root balls and these materials here, I'll try to bring out, get them organized somewhat. And these smaller ones where the root balls are pretty small, and they're long, not super long, but relatively long trunks to these that are narrow gauge, those will get fit in between the voids of some of the trunks. So like where that curly part is, I've decided to put some of the smaller root balls right next to that potential void, but those root balls will take care of the void. Now I'm going to go ahead and grab more of the sediment from this side and try to fill the voids as well. On top of these areas, there'll be a layer of rocks that gets pressed down into these areas as well, but I need as much, I'm going to call it glue or adhesive or filler to fit in between all of the logs and the root balls as I'm going along. And because ultimately when the rocks start going over the surface of these, it's really important that they have that their chunky pieces are fit into the mushy pieces, just like we'd fit larger stones into concrete if we didn't have enough concrete. So this is one of the piles I put alongside of the road, and unfortunately, using the mini excavator like this with the small excavation bucket, it does an okay job, but I'm not getting as much material at one time as I'd like to. So what I'm going to do in a couple of moments here, you'll see I switch over to using the excavator to load the bucket with some of this material, because dropping it along the way just means additional trips and less efficient. And all this brushy material fits in on top of the sediment and mucky material that I pull up from the system. So I tried this for a few more minutes here. And so when we get these longer trees and all, what I've got to do is position them between trees so that I can break the trunks. So I'll put it up against the blade, put it up against another tree, curl it around and snap them. And I'll do the same thing with grabbing the longer tree trunks with the root balls attached and bring those out. So these aren't ones that I actually broke. There's just the top half of one. Now it's folded out and stretched out full length. So trying to cut it all off there or bend it forward didn't work out that well. So again, getting these root balls to fit in, pack it down into some of the sediment that I just pulled up there is pretty important. So I'm going to move on. I realize, okay, time to get some rocks. So I go to my my pile of concrete and rocks, and these are from very small rocks from, let's say, 4 inches in diameter all the way up to pretty good sized rocks. They fill that full bucket at times. And what I do is I load up the tractor. I don't completely load it because I'm going downhill and making my way around, and then drop it off at the place and then come back and load it up again. And so actually there's, I'm not going to bore you with 2 days worth of video doing this, but 2 days of me going back and forth and grabbing stones from this area and old concrete and taking that material, loading up the bucket, going down and depositing this material on top of the materials that you just saw. So this will be an intermediate layer, all of this stone and old concrete material that fits on top of some of the brush that already has some of the sediment mixed in with it. And this will get pressed down right into that material when I get down there again in a couple of minutes here. But this is, and there's a big chunk of concrete there, and some of these are rather tubular in shape. There was one big screw in here that I ended up flatting, getting a flat on one of my front tires for the tractor. Fortunately, I keep a spare for that front tires on the tractor, and I was able to fix that. So the bucket isn't completely full because if I filled it right up, going downhill would not be very efficient and certainly wouldn't work out for me. So 2 days of loading the bucket with rocks and concrete and dirt intermixed here, and gradually retapering the soil down in here. Just can't appreciate it, but I'm working my way up, tapering the bank to its original shape, going downhill over in this area. The living fence is to the left of the screen at this point, and so now I've gotten quite a few bucket loads down there, and I've got this one last chunk of concrete slab that I had before. This is probably 40 years ago I pulled this 35 years ago that I pulled this concrete up from around where we had a mobile home that we lived in before we built the house. So I'm heading my way down. I just went down a big steep bank. Now I'm getting to the main access road here and heading down. To the left is where we've been doing all the work. Still some brush piles in there, and a lot of this material comes out before the day is out today anyways. And I'll make a video explaining what I'm going to do in that area in the future. Because it's not safe to drive out here all the way yet, I'll set that concrete piece down, fill in some of the voids, press them down, run the tracks of the excavator over the area. Fortunately, there is some dirt that fills in between these areas. I'll get the first layer of stones down in here, press them down as best as I can into the muck and the brush that's there. Go on out and reposition that piece of concrete that's there. Keep running over all of this material over and over again so that I don't sink and tip the excavator over and create a hazardous situation for myself. Now again, there are root balls down in here that I've got to be aware of, so I don't want to try and press this down on one of the root balls. I want to get them to fill in between all of the roots of the root balls. So everything's getting interlaced in here and compacted. So there's brush underneath there, there's root balls underneath there, there's trunks underneath there. There's lots of sediment between a couple of layers of that, and now there's the rocky layer getting pressed down into here. And I'm grabbing more sediment and more logs that the beavers have over in that area there, and filling in, reaching out a little bit further so that that material can start to, first I want it to actually be very liquid and to filter down between all of the branches and the root balls that I put in here. So I'm consolidating several days worth of video footage here of the work that I'm doing. And now I'm coming back down in here, and I've realized, using the excavator to drive back and forth isn't the most efficient system. So I'm grabbing up a lot of this material. This was this morning that was alongside the road from a couple of days ago, or for almost a week ago. Grabbing the tractor, bring it down here, and what I'm going to do is load that. As long as it isn't too long, and I can fit 75 to 80% of the material into the bucket, I don't mind if some material sticks out. So I'll load the bucket, then I'll get some more material that I think is about the right amount to fit into the bucket. Dump that load on top of the rocks and on top of the next set of root balls that I put in there in the sediment, and then start working this in here. So it's a time-consuming process, but this is a way where I can safely work on top of all of this material, and at the same time start to prepare the area to the left of the screen there for the next steps of, there will be reforestation to the left of the screen here, and a swale that makes its way up to a culvert that'll go over under that access road where I've been driving over there back and forth. Ultimately, but this will all be reforested with trees in this area. But this is also going to be an area where I'm going to harvest much of this soil, but the soil that I take out of this area will be replaced by the soil to the left of the screen right now, where the pond will be excavated. So down in here I'm trying to tease out all of the small stumps from where the beaver have cut all these small things up, because if I get down in there with one of the tire tubes, and those little spikes sticking up from the root masses that are there will just go right through one of those tires. So constantly going back and forth, loading up the bucket and depositing this on top of all the logs and the root balls and all that sediment material over and over and over again. Makes a boring video, but gives you an idea of the process that I go through. The tan soil material there is from the base of a pond before that was used to create this roadway that's down in here now. So coming in here, and so there's some of these, one of these big bushy materials, which is 20 feet tall, and 4 or 5 inch caliber trunks coming up from these multi-trunked bushes. This is one of the ones that the beaver love to go ahead and chew on and use as a food source throughout the whole winter. They put it into their store piles. But I've been watching them drag their material back and forth, and we'll make sure they have plenty of this as a food source and a structural system as well. But because some of these are actually 20 feet tall, 18 to 20 feet tall, I'm taking them, and what I'm going to do is push these with the excavator and manipulate that. I'm going to have to dump the load that's in the tractor now, put it up to where I got to go. Then I'm going to come back, move the tractor out of the way, park it, come back here, hop on the excavator, and see, can I manipulate it between down this roadway between all these trees without harming any of the trees. There is an oak there that I bent over, but it ended up being fine. Hopefully I'll leave a couple of these oaks right there, but some of them I'll be transplanting to different spots on the property. And again, it's a little bit hard to keep these things together when there's such a cluster of these. There's probably 30 of these trunks in here. Doesn't look like too much, but it is a pretty significant bunch. Now I'm going to push these to the right side here. I've already twisted some of them so the root balls are away from us in some, and the root balls are next to us in the rest. And then I got to come over here, work with the rest of the brushy material and pack this down. This is all on top of the stone and more sediment material, building this area up, moving some of those bigger stones around because some of those were over there where the beaver were. I'm sorry, where I was pulling out a lot of that material. Then again, on top of all this brushy material, I need to put another layer of the sealant or space occupying sediment and muck material. So it's constantly going back and getting this wet material to help to cement or help to eventually solidify this access road. And of course, this is just loaded with many anaerobic organisms that are in this area, which ultimately are going to be taken over by the surface organisms on all the brush and all the tree material there. And that's going to start breaking down all this woody material, just like a great hugelkultur system. That woody material is going to break down much more quickly than a large hugelkultur system. So here's another big pile of the material that I've been depositing here, working back and forth, multiple layers. Now you can see the tree that's in front of me there. So that's a maple tree that I'm going to have to cut off because I can't make it wide enough on either side of the tree to be an access road to get over here. So that tree is going to have to get cut off, and the base of that trunk of the tree will just get networked into this access road here. And we're actually getting really close now to the area where we're going to be able to make a turn and start coming out on the upper dam as well. This material here, I'm taking this muck and material here and building up the outer surface, because that dirt, once it gets dried out, will be interlocked with long logs, those 35, 40-foot logs that I'll be running all along the right side of it to make it easy for the wildlife to get up and down over the dam as well. And it also helps to stabilize the sides as well. So every layer that I put on here, whether it's stone, root balls, tree trunks, brush, the little stumps from the beaver and all, they all get a layer of this very wet, and if it's really super dry, more and more wet water I'll use to get in here. And as I'm doing this, I'm shaking the root ball, all the material there, trying to get it as agitated, vibrated as much as possible to get all of this wetter material to ooze down in between all of those voids. And that helps an awful lot to get things set. Now that I've got that area there set, I'm going to come back, and so hopefully the next time I come down here, I'll have a nice organized pile. I'll have flipped end for end each one of these trees. I'll gather them up and try to clear the area and check the area for any stumps that sharp spikes that I could run into. I'm going to gather up, there's another root mass up ahead here that I'm going to gather as well. Take the small stuff, move it up close to the edge there so I can load that into the bucket. More of the long, narrow root mass attached to trunks as well. And get these materials out. Got a couple more trunks that I had cut off. I'll get those out of there because I've got to get this large root mass right here, which was actually a tree that had fallen and 2 branches or 3 branches were sticking up, and it created an extensive root mass there, which will make a good foundation for in the future as well. So this whole area here will be a swale and a reforested area up ahead of us, which I try to go down to in a moment here, but I start to sink when I start going down in here. Still a little bit too wet. Nope, going to turn around and head back. And so that's an overview of what I do down in here. Coming down to get as much material as I can ready for the next day, go on out, use the multiple layers. And if you found this video of value, please give us a thumbs up. Sorry this is a long one, lots of narration here. And share it with your friends if you think someone would like to know about this sort of thing. And by all means, folks, stay safe and take good care of yourselves. And by all means, plant some food, grow some food. Take care now. Bye-bye.